All right, so it's been 19 years since 9/11, and every year I experience no reduction in the unmitigated rage that I have towards all of the people, both in leadership and regular people, who ruined so many people's lives after what was absolutely a horrible tragedy. And I think it's time that we finally just admit that 9/11 worked. The terrorists won. Clearly, obviously. It wasn't even close. Everything that they sought out to achieve, they accomplished. It was never designed to take down the United States with one fell swoop. It was designed as a catalyst so that we could take down ourselves. And it 100% worked. What was the response to 9/11? We only came together insofar as white Christian people came together in this country to ostracize and make an enemy out of everybody else. The Sikh community was literally bloodied in the aftermath of 9/11. It created a cottage industry out of Islamophobia. An illegal war was launched in multiple countries against an enemy that was unnamed and didn't exist and couldn't be defeated. The first responders and the victims' families and the survivors were completely abandoned, especially by the Republican Party, who has very diligently worked since September 12th, 2001, to deny these survivors and first responders any access to reasonable health care. There was no reckoning in this country after 9/11. None. And 19 years later, people are still playing the same song and dance where they pretend that, we all came together and we, fought our enemies. And no, none of that happened. None of it. At all. It remains a perfectly executed terrorist attack. They got everything they wanted. And we knew it. The people in leadership knew what they wanted and gave it to them anyway. And now we engage in this revisionist history. And I'm tired of it. We lost. They won. Period. So there's one other component of the aftermath of 9/11 that really enrages me, and I think part of what is frustrating is I don't see any timeline on which this country will actually deal with the nuances of this, because we can't even recognize the obvious stuff. But the problem is, while there were people who stood up and said this is wrong and this isn't going to work, and we are going down a very dangerous path from which we will likely never recover, those people were not only a very small minority, but they were ostracized. They were called terrorist sympathizers. Their loyalty to this country was questioned. I remember my dad described being ostracized in our synagogue because he was against the Iraq War. His Judaism was questioned. His morality was questioned. His patriotism was questioned, right? All the while, by the way, we can blame the Bush administration for a whole lot of stuff. The Bush administration is responsible for catastrophic global damage. They stoked fear. They lied. They committed blatant crimes. They infiltrated mosques in this country, spying on American citizens. They participated in extrajudicial killings and torture across the world. But we cannot pretend like huge swaths of this country were not fully behind them, fully supporting them. The op-eds from 2001 to like 2004, 2005 are insane, the way that people are playing along. And the problem is, we will never be able to admit that they won and we lost if people can never admit that they wanted things to happen how they did. And the fact that they didn't work out doesn't change that. And that's why this revisionist history continues. Because there's plenty more people than just Bush administration officials who need to stand up and say sorry for the rest of their living days in the hopes that they could possibly atone for the unbelievable failure, the moral failure, the policy failure, the cultural failure. But people will never admit that. And that right there is American cowardice at its finest pinnacle. And look, I just have to add that it never had to be like this. And it doesn't have to be like that now. So while we cannot wait for other people, be they former leadership or op-ed authors from leading up to the Iraq War, whomever they may be, we don't have to wait for them to admit their mistakes and learn from them, but we can do that. We can each individually commit ourselves to owning up to the things that we've not lived up to what we should have, and committing ourselves to actually change moving forward, to not just say that Black Lives Matter and that Muslim lives matter, but to actually live that truth each and every single day, to make informed decisions about voting, even when the circumstances are far from ideal. Because there is nothing worse than simply pretending like we play no role, like we have no part, like we have no voice, like we have no option. Because we do. Even if it's slow, even if it's depressing, even if it's upsetting, there is only one way forward. And that's one step at a time.